Welcome to Pharma Insights Unplugged, a platform where we engage with thought leaders shaping the future of healthcare, medical affairs, and clinical research. I'm your host, Dr. Amit Dang, and through this series, we aim to explore the evolving landscape of pharmaceuticals, digital health, and evidence based decision making. Today, we are excited to welcome Dr. Carla Amigo, former medical affairs head for growth and emerging markets at Takeda. With over 2 decades of experience, Dr. Amigo has led strategic medical operations across oncology, GI, rare diseases, and immunology. Known for her thought leadership on measuring medical performance and maximizing patient outcomes, she joins us today to discuss what truly defines medical affairs impact and why it matters now more than ever. So, good afternoon, Dr. Carla, and welcome to Pharma Insights Unplugged.
Thank you very much, Amit, for the kind introduction. Good afternoon for you. So thank you very much for the invite to share some thoughts about this very relevant topic. I'm very passionate about it. And now that the healthcare system is evolving so much and all the new technologies are coming into the stage. So very happy to have this conversation.
So, Dr. Carla, in your view, what defines the true impact in medical affairs today? And how can we shift from activity based metrics to outcomes based metrics?
It's a great question to start because for many years, measuring the impact of medical affairs has been challenging. And one of the main reasons is that there is no consistent definition of impact. Different organizations interpret impact in various ways, and this leads to a lack of a unified approach to measurement. So one of the main things is to define what is our goal as a medical affairs organization. We agree that our ultimate goal is to improve patient outcomes and experiences. So how can we as medical affairs contribute to improve patient outcomes? What does this mean in practice? It means improving standard of care, changing clinical practice, improving access to treatment. So this is the challenges we face. And how can we shift from this activity-based metrics to outcomes-based thinking? One of the ways is aligning strategies with long-term patient outcomes. When we defined a very comprehensive medical strategy with well-defined critical success factors and tactics, we should translate this into patient outcomes. So instead of concentrating in measuring activities, number of medical educations, number of KOL interactions, we should think more about what are the outcomes we expect? What are we thinking when we define these tactics? Are we changing clinical practice? Are we improving standard of care? And we should define the KPIs just from the very beginning. We should also create a culture of data-driven decision-making, establishing a standardized approach for measurement and to measure across the organization the same KPIs. So it's very important to define like a process-driven flow so everybody can follow and we can start creating this culture and creating this behavior. And also for this, we need to train continuously the team for decision-making.
What are the most meaningful KPIs that medical affairs teams should be tracking to showcase value across internal and external stakeholders? Although we just had a conversation that it's more about the outcomes, but then still would like to understand your views, like what would be the most meaningful KPIs in that context?
Well, defining the most meaningful is difficult because also the short answer would be it depends on the strategy. But however, to effectively showcase the value of the medical affairs organization, it's essential to track both quantitative and both qualitative key performance indicators. Our main ultimate goal is to improve patient outcomes. But if we think that we want to improve patient outcomes, we first need to change somehow clinical practice. And if we want to change clinical practice, we need to change the sentiment of our KOLs. And for this, we need to have very strong relationships and scientific interactions. So this brings us to the quantitative metrics. So the most valuable thing comes when we look them all together. If we think about the quantitative metrics, and there's some resistance to measure number of interactions, coverage of priority stakeholders, number of KOL engagement plans in place, number of medical education activities, number of attendees. They're usually underestimated and underutilized, but these are the operational effectiveness. So if we achieve this operational effectiveness, then we can make progress and start looking at the outcomes. But we need these quantitative metrics in order to make progress. And then we come to the qualitative So
Right.
the KOL feedbacks, the number of the actionable insights, the scientific share of voice, the sentiment of our KOLs. Is there a change in guidelines? Did we obtain an inclusion in national formularies? The challenge here, these are data that are very complex to analyze. For example, if there is a change in guidelines, can we differentiate as medical affairs how much we contributed to this change? Or on the other side, we change the sentiment of the KOLs over time. But do we change clinical practice in the end? So I think that the important thing is to, of course, have this strong foundation and having this behavior and try to connect the dots as much as possible.
Certainly, there are a few things which are too complicated to track, like as you mentioned, how much clinical practice got transformed. But yes, that's a real outcome, right?
And I think these metrics are useful not only to show the value and to show the impact, but how do we evolve as a medical affairs organization?
So you have led cross-functional teams across global and emerging markets. So how do you ensure alignment in performance measurement when operating across regions with diverse healthcare dynamics?
Well, leading cross-functional team across global and emerging markets really represents unique challenges due to diverse regulatory environments, different patient unmet needs, and also cultural contexts. So on one side, it's crucial to adapt performance metrics to reflect the local healthcare dynamics. So this involves customizing indicators to account for regional or local differences. Some countries require local data for regulatory submissions, and there will be specific activities of the MSLs starting early, working with R&D teams, with regulators, and this should be captured. But at the same time, the overarching goals and critical success factors should not change, and we need to ensure alignment. So how do we ensure alignment? On one side, we're establishing a standardized performance measurement framework and align with the countries. It's very important to take time to communicate, to understand the differences, working with the medical leadership to capture what are the differences and being able to measure these differences, but also making the leaders understand that what is the contribution to the global strategy. And this is mainly about fostering continuous communication, obtaining feedback, identifying challenges, ensuring collaborative problem solving, and training also.
Now, getting on to the next question, with the rise of data and digital tools, what role does technology play in measuring medical affairs performance, and are we leveraging it enough today?
Well, definitely. Technology plays an increasingly vital role in measuring the performance of medical affairs, and this allows us to transition from quantitative metrics into qualitative metrics. So technology is nowadays helping a lot in this traditional data integration and visualization, pulling data from different sources and showing unified dashboards. But now we have really the contribution of more advanced analytics and artificial intelligence. So we can have aggregated summaries, topic trends, predictive modeling, and sentiment analysis. For example, using natural language processing, machine learning algorithms, transforming the way the information and the insights are collected and are analyzed. Are we using enough technology? It depends. Different organizations have really adopted several digital tools, but it varies. And I think that these differences are due to mainly data silos. So the fragmented data systems that could make it difficult really to have a comprehensive analysis and decision making. The other thing is the skill gaps. This is linked to trainings. We need to further understand what are the available tools and how can we use them. So how we integrate new technologies with existing systems. This can be quite complex. To maximize the value of technology in measuring medical affairs, mass organizations should invest in infrastructure, in training, and in creating a culture that embraces data-driven decision making.
There are few tools in the market. So companies, they usually prefer to outsource this kind of an activity, or they prefer to have their own built in-house tools.
I think it varies across different organizations. For some organizations, they prefer to have their own tools, and this makes it easier to have alignment across the organization. This is not only about medical, it's also about aligning with other functions.
Got it.
So I think it varies depending on the sometimes the size of the organization, the resources of the organization. The important thing is to create this culture of data-driven decision making.
Yeah. So, Dr. Carla, while we were trying to evaluate different tools, we could figure out that they were quite complex. There was so much of data entry to put across. It's almost like the medical affairs professionals needs to maintain a very exhaustive daily diary. So, do you really think that while we are trying to measure the impact, is it really aligning with the objectives or it's disturbing their productivity? What it should be in an ideal situation?
Yes, it's a great question. I think that the challenge we face every day is really, on one side, is how to make things simple, because
Right.
sometimes we're really very much ambitious in terms of measuring the impact, and then if we find difficulties in connecting the dots, or we need to start building comprehensive medical strategies that are connected with the outcomes and with starting with simple metrics. And once
Got it.
we are really very much comfortable with these metrics, we understand them, we are sure that all the organization is aligned on these metrics and we can show all together the impact, then we can start moving forward. So it's really starting thinking about outcomes, defining simple metrics, analyzing them, sharing with internal stakeholders, and then making progress. It's a journey, and we really need to make progress step by step, but ensuring that we have this operational effectiveness ensured, and then starting moving forward with maybe more qualitative and complex KPI.
Can you share a successful example from your experience where impact measurement helped elevate the role of medical affairs within the organization?
Well, we have a very interesting examples where we leveraged natural language processing to analyze the sentiments of KOLs. And we used to have before this insight into isolated reports. And we used this tool and found very interesting outcomes experience. On one side, we could see the depth and the strength of the relationships we've had with the KOLs based on the quality of the insights. And also we could see how the sentiment evolved after the release of new data or a new scientific strategy. And we could see how this sentiment evolved across time. The other side, we could see how we could influence strategy, how we could evolve. So should we keep on doing the same things we're doing? Are we making the right questions in order to obtain the right insights? With this, we identified capability gaps, we refined our scientific strategy, and we updated some field medical training. So this was one of the experiences, the learnings, and brought us to the question I mentioned before. We changed the sentiment. But do
Got
we
it.
change clinical practice? So how can we be a little bit more ambitious in our medical
Right.
plans so we can also move a step forward and also change clinical practice in order to improve patient outcomes?
What are common pitfalls companies face while designing metrics for medical affairs, and how can we avoid becoming overly focused on vanity metrics?
Many organizations are a little bit skeptical to measuring impact. So this may come from the belief that the vanity quantitative metrics, they really cannot measure the complexity of the interactions of the medical affairs teams with the KOLs. And on the other side, this brings some transparency in vanity metrics. This can bring some vulnerability and also the comparison with some commercial roles. I think that they're underutilized, even some vanity metrics. We need to still focus on operational metrics, but make them relevant. And this is making them relevant not only for the medical affairs organization, but also for across the organ. So the first thing would be the medical affairs to own the whole process,
Right.
from the definition of the strategy, what are the metrics, what is the analytics, what is the story we're going to build, and how we communicate. And then to have all the buy-in of the whole organization.
Not an easy task, certainly.
This brings us really to the medical leadership. How do we as medical leaders, we embrace enterprise leadership? We need
Right.
really to have a continuous communication plan to communicate internally what is the value of the impact of medical affairs.
So, how do you see the role of MSLs evolving in impact measurement, and what best practices can help quantify their scientific engagement?
Well, what we have discussed up to now, it also applies to the MSLs, but this brings to a specific situation. I think whenever we had internal surveys or even external surveys, we see that there is still not a complete understanding or alignment in what is the role of the MSL, the product life cycle. So is it the same, the role of the MSL or the goals when in pre-launch phases or in early phases of clinical development? What is the role of the MSLs in after the launch of an innovative product? So here the challenge is really defining what do we want to achieve in each stage of the product life cycle. So the main thing is to define a goal and define the metrics for each stage of the product life cycle.
At what point should impact measurement be integrated into medical affairs strategy during planning, execution, or post-activity assessment?
Definitely, it should be integrated from the very beginning, since planning. Setting targets before the activities start is essential for effective execution. So if we start defining the critical success factors, we define the tactics, and we have these tactics translated into patient outcomes, this will make it easier to then assess the impact of medical affairs. And this is not only about defining the right metrics and making the right analytics, but also is about changing behaviors, creating a culture of making decisions based on data. So the answer is we should start thinking about metrics since the very beginning and integrating them into the medical plan.
So, looking ahead, how do you envision the next frontier in medical affairs performance evaluation? Will we see more predictive analytics or AI-driven insights or patient-centered value models?
Hopefully, we will have all of them. Well, AI-driven insights will take this further by integrating the different data sources, scientific literature, social media, health records, to generate real-time actionable intelligence. Also, AI will refine this scientific engagement to identify what are the right KOLs for specific activities and also customizing interactions. Predictive analysis, well, will play a major role by helping medical affairs teams anticipate clinical and stakeholders' needs, forecasting trends in real-world evidence, and also optimizing resource allocations, allowing us to be a little bit more proactive in generating this metrics and impact measurement. All this will take us to more patient-centered value model. If we think that the healthcare systems are evolving and taking more into consideration value-based healthcare and patient-reported outcomes into decision making, I think this will bring medical affairs in defining the metrics in order to understand if we have an impact in this value-based care and patient-reported outcomes decision makings. There's a way to go in terms of building foundations and educating internal stakeholders about the impact of medical affairs and doing all these things together.
So, is there any message that you would like to share with the youngsters out there who want to get into the field of medical affairs? Should they really know about this particular perspective before they get into it?
Maybe summarizing a little bit what I mentioned before, medical affairs, it has gone through a deep transformation in the past years. And it's not only about how we evolve, but how we show the impact of what we do. So for this, it's not only about science. Of course,
Right.
science is the most important thing.
Yeah.
But then it's also about how we develop medical affairs leadership in order to be more data driven and also how we communicate internally and externally the value of what we do.
So thank you so much, Dr. Carla, for joining us today and sharing such thoughtful perspectives on what truly defines impact in medical affairs. Your insights on outcomes-based metrics, global alignment, the role of technology, and the evolving value of MSLs offer a much-needed lens for both current and future leaders in the function. And it's clear that as medical affairs continue to evolve, the ability to measure meaningful impact beyond activity will be the central to its influence across the organization and ultimately on patient outcomes. So, once again, thank you for taking the time to be with us. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. The pleasure is mine. Thank you.